I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table and watched 35 McMansions instantly turn into lakefront property. The board members of the Willowbrook Estates HOA froze in silence, their manicured smiles cracking like paint in the summer heat. For years these people believed they owned me, believed their fancy bylaws could erase 100 years of Morrison history. They didn't know the land beneath their sparkling sidewalks and imported lawns once belonged to my grandfather. He worked this soil with calloused hands long before their cookie-cutter dream homes were poured into it. When I came back from Afghanistan, I found more than overgrown fields and dust. I found my family's farm stolen through legal loopholes and HOA signatures. The Willowbrook Estates they bragged about on glossy brochures was built on top of our well, our creek, and our memories. The first time I met their president, a man named Cliff Davenport, he looked at me like I was a trespasser on my own land. He wore a golf shirt tucked into khaki shorts, the kind of outfit that said power without purpose. He told me politely at first that the HOA doesn't recognize private wells within the community limits. I smiled. Good thing I'm not part of your community. He didn't like that answer. Within weeks I started receiving letters, first about unauthorized structures, then non-compliant fencing, and eventually trespassing on HOA property. They even had the nerve to fine me for aggressive posture during a board meeting. Aggressive posture? I guess standing up for my grandfather's land counted as a threat in their little kingdom. They tried to bury me under paperwork, but I faced worse than bureaucrats with clipboards. Out there in Helmand Province, I learned patience. I learned how to wait for the right moment, and that moment came when I found the deed. Tucked in an old metal box beneath my grandfather's workbench, the yellowed papers spelled out something even the county clerk had forgotten. The Morrison family still owned the underground water rights for the entire tract. Every lawn, every decorative pond, every irrigation system in Willowbrook ran on our aquifer. When I held that deed in my hands, I didn't feel anger. I felt balance returning. So here I was, sitting across from Cliff and his board in their marble-floored clubhouse, the same place they'd laughed about that old veteran with his tractor. Their laughter stopped when they saw the seal, official, dated, and impossible to contest. This deed predates your HOA charter by 74 years, I said calmly, and it gives me the right to control all water drawn from this property. Cliff's wife, the self-appointed landscaping chair, stammered, "That can't be legal." "Oh, it's not only legal," I said, "it's binding." A ripple of panic spread through the room. They knew what it meant. No water meant no sprinklers, no fountains, no lush green lawns. Their suburban paradise would turn brown before summer was over. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just told them I'd be fencing off the well starting tomorrow. As I walked out, I glanced back. The same people who once wrote me up for grass height violations now sat speechless, staring at the document that shattered their illusion of control. They thought they could bury my family's legacy under asphalt and bylaws. But they forgot something my grandfather used to say. You can't build paradise on stolen soil. When I left that meeting, I figured they'd back off, but I should have known better. People like Cliff and his wife don't lose quietly. 2 days later, I woke up to the rumble of heavy machinery echoing across the valley. From my porch, I saw bulldozers tearing through the creek bed that fed my grandfather's dam. They were trying to reroute the water again. That dam wasn't just a pond or decoration, it was a living system. Pops had built it in 1978, with help from the Army Corps of Engineers. It regulated floodwaters, kept cattle hydrated, and provided irrigation during droughts. It was built to help the community long before the HOA ever existed. Now it was being choked to death under their greed. I drove down to the site, boots sinking into the mud, heart pounding harder than the engines. The foreman looked up from his clipboard. "Private property, sir. You'll have to leave." "Private, huh?" I said, showing him the deed. "You're standing on my water." He didn't even blink. "Take it up with the HOA." And that's when she arrived. Margaret Thornwell, the so-called president of Willowbrook Estates. She pulled up in a spotless white BMW, wearing a tennis visor and pearls like she'd just come from brunch instead of a construction zone. "Mr. Morrison," she said, syrupy sweet. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "Looks pretty clear to me," I replied. She smiled that tight, practiced smile, the kind people wear when they think they're winning. "Your family abandoned this land. We've invested millions turning it into something beautiful. Surely you don't want to hold up progress." I took a step closer. "You diverted a natural waterway. That's a federal crime." Her smile faltered. Just for a second, but by the next morning, she'd gone on the offensive. The HOA posted warnings online about a hostile individual interfering with community operations. They sent letters to the county about safety concerns, and the sheriff showed up to perform a wellness check after an anonymous tip claimed I was a dangerous veteran with PTSD. I recognized the tactic instantly. It's called administrative warfare. You don't win with bullets. You win with forms, citations, and phone calls designed to make your target break. Only, I don't break that easy. That night, I called Tony Riggs, an old army buddy who now worked with the EPA. After I told him what was happening, he whistled low. "Jake, if they redirected that creek without federal permits, that's a violation of the Clean Water Act. You've got 'em."
I spent the next week documenting everything: photos, videos, flow measurements. I installed motion cameras around the dam, logged timestamps, even charted the drop-in water level each day. Meanwhile, Maggie's patrol, 3 HOA board members with clipboards and walkie-talkies, started parking outside my driveway like they were guarding a border. They'd write down every visitor's license plate, pretending they were protecting the neighborhood. The intimidation was relentless. Noise complaints, fines for unsightly fencing, even an inspection notice claiming my old farmhouse was structurally unsafe. It was all designed to wear me down, but instead, it sharpened me. I wasn't just fighting for dirt and water, I was fighting for Pops, for the man who taught me to build, to fix, and to stand my ground when something's worth it. So I dug deeper, literally and legally. At the county archives, I found the original 1978 engineering documents, signed by the Army Corps. That meant the dam fell under federal jurisdiction, and once the feds are involved, no HOA on earth has the authority to override it. A week later, Tony confirmed what I already suspected. "Jake," he said, "the EPA's launching a preliminary investigation. Keep your head down, and keep your evidence airtight." That night, I sat on the dam as the sun went down, the air thick with the smell of wet cedar and diesel from the construction site. Fireflies flickered over the water like tiny lanterns. I ran my hand through the cool surface and whispered, "They think this is about power, but this is about balance." Behind me, the lights of Willowbrook Estates glowed like a false paradise, and as thunder rumbled in the distance, I realized what Pops meant all those years ago, when he told me, "Water always finds its way home." They wanted war, they were about to get one. For weeks I lived between exhaustion and purpose. Every morning I woke to the growl of engines echoing off the valley walls, the smell of diesel bleeding into the scent of mesquite and wet soil. Every night, I sat by the dam with a flashlight, watching the waterline drop another inch. The HOA thought I was just a bitter veteran with too much time on his hands. They had no idea they were building their dream houses on a ticking clock designed by nature itself. The deeper I dug through the records, the clearer the picture became. Margaret Maggie Thornwell's husband, Councilman Rick Thornwell, wasn't just a helpful city official. He was the lead investor in the very construction company, pouring those foundations downstream, the zoning changes, the emergency permits. Every one of them bore his signature, and Maggie's so-called beautification projects were nothing but camouflage, paper-thin PR to mask a multi-million-dollar land grab. When I confronted her at the construction site again, she didn't even bother pretending anymore. She stood there with her arms folded, eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses. "Mr. Morrison," she said, voice cold as limestone, "you could still sell. Take the offer, buy a nice place in town, and we can all move on." I laughed. "You're not buying land, Maggie. You're buying silence." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Careful, soldier boy, we wouldn't want another incident." That word incident hung in the air like gunpowder. She was threatening to use my service record against me, the oldest, dirtiest trick in the book, but I'd stopped being afraid of people like her a long time ago. The weather started changing first. Hot August gave way to storm-heavy September skies. Clouds rolled in low and dark, grumbling across the horizon like engines warming up for battle. The weather app called it a seasonal thunderfront. I called it timing. Tony from the EPA called me one evening, his voice barely audible over static. "Jake, the investigation's moving. We've got proof of illegal waterway diversion. Keep your documentation ready, and don't do anything impulsive." I stared out at the valley while rain began to needle the tin roof. "Impulsive?" I said. "No, just timely."
That night, I walked to the dam with my flashlight cutting thin ribbons through the mist. The rain fell heavier, pattering against my jacket and dripping from my cap. I knelt beside the spillway gates, rusted steel and concrete, older than I was. My grandfather's initials were still etched into the control housing, H.M. Morrison, 1978. In his old ledger, I'd found a note written in his careful, blocky handwriting. "In case of diversion, restore natural flow to protect downstream farms." It wasn't just a note. It was instruction, legal and moral. I remembered how he used to tell me, "The land remembers who takes care of it, and it pays back what's owed." By the next morning, the storm was full fury. Rain hammered the windows, wind howled through the pecan trees, and Willowbrook's pristine lawns turned into shimmering puddles. The HOA patrol was still parked at the property line in their rain slickers, trying to look official. One of them waved a clipboard at me as I drove past in my old pickup, but I didn't slow down. When I reached the dam, the water was already licking at the spillway gates. I checked my instruments, flow rate, pressure, volume, just like I'd done 100 times in the field. Every reading told me the same thing: Willow Creek was trying to come home. I radioed Tony one last time. "You might want to have the EPA cameras rolling," I said. He paused. "Jake, what are you planning?" "Maintenance," I said simply. "Pop's kind." At 3:17 p.m., lightning split the sky. The ground shook with the first deep roar of water forcing its way through the old steel gates. The spillway trembled, then came alive, decades of sediment bursting free as the floodgates opened. A wall of water surged down the original creek bed, carving its way past the barriers the HOA had built to cage it. The so-called decorative stream behind the model homes filled first, swelling like a rising breath, then gravity did the rest. The newly built foundations, those polished McMansions with their imported tile and fragile retaining walls, were never designed to handle the real Willow Creek. Within minutes, the decorative stonework cracked and buckled. Water thundered through the manicured backyards, sweeping lawn furniture, mulch, and a few unfortunate golf carts straight into the flood channel. I stood on the ridge, soaked to the bone, watching nature correct the lies men had written. From down in the valley, I heard shouting, panic, the metallic shriek of sirens, but mixed in with it all, I heard something else, the deep resonant sound of balance being restored. By dawn the rain had stopped. The morning light glowed orange across a landscape transformed. The dam held steady, exactly as designed, but Willowbrook Estates was a mess of mud and debris. I drove down slowly, camera rolling. Residents stood in shock, staring at waterlogged yards where luxury once gleamed. No one was hurt, thank God, but every single home bore the mark of the flood. Maggie appeared near the clubhouse, her white visor gone, hair plastered to her face. When she saw me, she stormed forward, fury cracking her voice. "You did this. You'll pay for this." I looked past her at the murky water glinting under the morning sun. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "that's what happens when you build on stolen ground." Two black SUVs pulled up behind her. Out stepped EPA officials, clipboards in hand. Tony gave me a quick nod. Within minutes, they were handing Maggie papers, investigation orders, violation citations, the works. Rick Thornwell showed up an hour later, shouting into his phone about jurisdiction. He stopped shouting when the agents told him federal charges were pending for environmental fraud and insurance misrepresentation. By noon, the HOA's power was broken, their accounts frozen. The development company filed for bankruptcy within the week. A month later, the floodwaters receded, revealing the old creek winding freely through the valley again, just as Pops had designed it. Grass sprouted along the banks, birds returned to the cattails, and the air smelled clean for the first time in years. I rebuilt the fencing, not to keep people out, but to remind them what stewardship looks like. The county offered me compensation for environmental restoration. I didn't take a dime. Instead, I placed a wooden sign at the base of the dam, hand-carved with my grandfather's favorite quote, "Water remembers its path, and justice always flows downhill." Sometimes, when the evening sun hits the water just right, I can almost see him sitting there, old hat, coffee cup in hand, smiling, and for the first time in a long while, the land feels quiet again.